Josh Naylor is going back to the Seattle Mariners, bringing us our first big free agent signing of the winter. And this also takes the Mets' second best option on the market behind Pete Alonso off the table.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Locked On Mets is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. On today's show, we're going to talk about the Josh Naylor signing. I'm going to break things down in the first segment, what he signed for and how that impacts the market at first base. Second segment, we're going to talk about the one suitor that is jumping out as a real candidate to sign Pete Alonso away from the New York Mets. Then the final segment, if Pete does leave, what do the Mets do? And is it more likely that Pete Alonso leaves or Edwin Diaz leaves? Before we get into any of that, though, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. This is the #1 daily podcast on the New York Mets. If you want to find any of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the editor-in-chief. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. If your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download FanDuel today. So Josh Naylor is back with the Seattle Mariners on a 5-year deal. The exact dollar amount has not been reported as I record this show just past midnight here on, Monday morning. Naylor is getting somewhere between $90 and $100 million. That is what the report is at this point, which does give you some insight into the market at first base, because on the absolute highest end, if Naylor gets the full $100 million, that's $20 million per season. Once again, the first base position does not get paid at the absolute top of the market. If there's a shortstop that hits the market, they're going to be getting at least $25 million if they are one of the top free agent shortstops. Last year, Willie Adames got $26 million per. I can almost guarantee that Bo Bichette's going to get at least that in this market, depending on how many years he signs for. If Bo Bichette gets a 10-year deal, maybe it does slip below $25 million per. But again, that is the precedent that has been set at that position, even if Bo Bichette was over at second base or third base. Guys at those positions get paid more. If you're an outfielder like Kyle Tucker, he could make $40 million per year. He's definitely going to make something that starts with a 3 at the very least. He's going to get $30 million per. It just depends on how many years he gets and how many teams really do dive all in on the Kyle Tucker sweepstakes and what kind of a bidding war can they drum up. Sure, not going to be the bidding war that Juan Soto got, but it could be still a healthy one that gets this guy paid into even the $400 million range. Pete Alonso is a first baseman, and you look at the precedent, and we can't ignore this, and you can't just look back and say, oh, well, what did Prince Fielder and Miguel Cabrera get, or Albert Pujols? That is a different era of baseball where defense was not valued in the same way. The positional importance was not valued in the same way. It was home runs, RBIs, batting average. We're not in that game anymore. So Pete Alonso is not going to get paid $35 million per season. It's just leaps and bounds more than his contemporaries in the market. And his contemporaries in the market the last 2 years have been Josh Naylor and Christian Walker. Christian Walker got 3 years, $60 million, $20 million per. Josh Naylor, if he gets the full $100 million, gets $20 million per, more likely because he got 2 additional years compared to what Christian Walker got. He's probably going to dip a little bit below that. It very well could be 5 for 90. It could be 5 for 92. We still don't know the exact dollar amount, but what we do know, he's not making $25 million per. For my prediction at justbaseball.com, I predicted the contract and landing spot for each of the top 20 free agents, and I'm going to keep adding to that list throughout, so now I got to replace Josh Naylor on the top 20 because now he's off the list of the top remaining free agents. But I projected 4 years, $88 million. I thought that he would get a tick above Christian Walker, but I didn't think he would necessarily get a 5th year. To be completely honest, my gut said 5 years, and I had somebody that I talk about these contracts with back and forth who advised me or cautioned me that he, from what he was hearing about the market, how he felt about it, thought that guys are going to get maybe some less years. So I sort of skewed that direction and I bumped up the AAV a little bit. Ends up being, again, 5 years, 90 to 100 million. So this continues that precedent of first baseman not being fully valued on the market the way other positions are. You look at the other contracts at first base. Freddie Freeman, surefire Hall of Famer, he got $27 million per over 6 years. Matt Olson on an extension got $21 million per over 8 years. Vladdy is the one exception, but he signed that deal at 26 years old for a franchise that was giving him the keys to that franchise for the next decade plus. And so he gets 500 over 14 years, and that's $35.7 million per. But that's one guy. And that's a guy that when he signed that deal at 26, that's 5 years younger than Pete Alonso is likely to sign his contract, as he's going to turn 31 on December 7th. And we'll see. Maybe Pete Alonso does sign before that, and hopefully it's to the Mets. But either way, he's going into his age 31 season. I projected Pete Alonso's contract at 5 years, $150 million, but that projection baked in $50 million of deferrals, which would take that contract down to $26.35 million, somewhere in that range. Okay, the math can get a little bit wonky when you're trying to calculate present day value on a contract with deferrals and what year do the deferrals hit and how much money is deferred each year. It can get a little bit crazy, but I did the math the best that I could, and ultimately it brought that AAV just a shade over 26 million. I think that's the market for Pete Alonso. I think if Pete Alonso goes out into the market and he gets other teams interested and he signs a 5-year deal, 5 for 130, which is $26 million per, is more what you'd expect other teams to bid. I don't know if there's a team that's going to come out over the top and bid on Pete Alonso to the extent where he's making $30+ million per season on a long-term deal. Does that mean that he's more likely to go back to the Mets? We don't know, because we don't know if the Mets are even willing to give him 5 years. What I will say is this is an interesting signing on a couple of different fronts. On one hand, this takes Josh Naylor off the board. Now, anyone who's listened to this show since the season ended, I have spent very little time on Josh Naylor. And anytime when I've brought him up, I said, Josh Naylor, the second best first baseman on the market, but he's going to re-sign with the Mariners. It just feels like it's perfect. Obviously, that ended up happening. I couldn't envision Josh Naylor in another uniform, almost to an extent where I felt more confident that Naylor was going back to Seattle than I'm confident that Alonso's coming back to the Mets. Because we did this all offseason last year. And I just don't know if the Mets are going to put the 5 years on the table that I think they should. And I think if they do put 5 years on the table, and it is, again, you can defer some money and make it make sense where Pete Alonso can have that ego stroked a little bit. Scott Boras can have that ego stroked a little bit, where they get the big deal that has the big round numbers of $150 million, but you defer some cash to make it make a little more sense, where it more fits what his market value should be based on other first basemen at that position who have been paid in the past here. And unless you're Vladdy, you're not getting over $30 million per season, and none of them have even gotten $30 million per season. Now, the Mets last year signed Pete Alonso to a 2-year, $54 million deal. That set his AAV at $27 million per, which again was not $30 million. He got $30 million for the 2025 season, but the AAV was not there because you baked in that second-year player option. So it's interesting to see how this now is going to impact things on Pete. Because on one hand, there's no other first baseman outside of the two guys coming over from Japan. But when it comes to major league first baseman who will hit free agency after playing last season in the show, you pretty much got Alonso standing on an island, and then it drops off to like Ryan O'Hearn or Luis Ariz, if you consider him a first baseman. That also means there's not as many options for the Mets. So is there a team that is going to take Pete Alonso from the Mets and commit to him in a way that the Mets are unwilling to match? I want to talk about the one team this early in free agency that seems to be the top suitor for Alonso alongside the Mets. We're going to get to that in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA season's here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if it hits, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets. That's right. You pick a bet, you put down $5. If you win, you're going to unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet, whether it's player props, whether you want to build a same-game parlay, even if you want to jump in live as the action's unfolding. It makes watching basketball even more exciting. You got a little bit of something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or you love diving into the stats, FanDuel is going to make the game day experience so much better. It's quick, it's easy, it's the best way to add a little more energy to your NBA slate. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day, and thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. Now, let's talk about the market for Pete Alonso and the other teams who could get in the bidding. Theoretically, the Mariners were a landing spot that's now off the table, but then you look at the other teams that could be in, and there's one that has jumped out that seems to be the ideal spot for Pete, if not the New York Mets, and that's the Boston Red Sox. The Red Sox this offseason are looking for a middle-of-the-order bat, and they're looking for frontline pitching. And they got a lot of different moving parts here because they have an outfield right now that has 4 good options. You got 2 Gold Glovers from this past season, Ceddanne Rafaela in center and Wilyer Abreu in right, who's now won a Gold Glove 2 years in a row. In left, you got Jarren Duran, who in 2024 was an all-star, was one of the 10 best players in the game, ranked 7th in wins above replacement, had an awesome season. Last year, not as good of a season, 2025. But he still had a 4-win season. He still put together a season better than anything that Wilyer Abreu has put up based on WAR. But it might make sense for the Red Sox to trade Duran because he might have more value than Abreu. And they got Roman Anthony coming. Well, Roman Anthony's already here. Had a great rookie season. He got hurt at the end of it. But what I more mean as far as him coming is that this is his team. You are going to build that outfield around Roman Anthony, who was previously the top prospect in baseball before he debuted. They have a couple ways they can go about it. They can trade Duran, who has 3 years left to control, clear up a little bit of money because Duran is going to make $7.7 million in 2026. Wilyer Abreu is going to make the minimum. So Wilyer Abreu fits them a little more financially. It's a little bit of a cheaper expenditure. You get an extra year of control, and he's a Gold Glove right fielder. Now, they can play Roman Anthony in right, keep Jarren Duran in left, but if they do that, you're putting more pressure on Roman Anthony to play a very tough right field at Fenway Park. Playing left's a lot easier, and for the offensive burden that Roman Anthony is going to have and playing his first full 162 games, probably better to have him left, and that's where it seems like Jarren Duran might be the piece move. But if you move Duran, you're moving a lot of extra base hits out of your lineup. This is the guy that has led Major League Baseball. Well, actually, he led Major League Baseball in triples and doubles in 2024, and then this past season, he just led Major League Baseball in triples. I'm trying to think, maybe one of those 2 years, he only led the American League in triples. Maybe it was this year. He led the American League in triples, not Major League Baseball. Regardless, extra base machine Jarren Duran could be taken out of your lineup because maybe you flip him for a pitcher to slot towards the front of your rotation. However they go about it, they need to trade an outfielder because they have too many good position players. And they already have a little bit of a logjam at DH because they have Masataka Yoshida, who's just $18.6 million on their books. If they have the 4 outfielders, they need that DH spot. Now, if they trade one of the outfielders, they're good. They have those 3 guys. They have Christian Campbell that's going to play more outfield. He becomes your 4th outfielder. You can always put Ceddanne Rafaela at second base if you want to, but it's a Gold Glover in center. I don't know why you do that. And then you have Marcelo Meyer, who could be your 3rd baseman of the future. Also, you have Trevor Story coming off a good season. So they're in an interesting place because Alex Bregman's their top free agent. You'd think they want to retain him. If they did, they can just slide Meyer over to second. At first base, you have Tristan Casas, but he hasn't been able to stay on the field. And so then it gets back to all the reporting, which is that they're pretty interested in Pete Alonso. And why would they want Pete Alonso more than Alex Bregman? Well, maybe it's because they are that confident in Marcelo Meyer being ready to be their third baseman. And he brings more value on the left side of the infield than the right side of the infield. And if they just have no faith in Casas at this point, they could trade Casas, sell low, or they can eat some money, trade Yoshida, and have Casas and Alonso sort of splitting that DH first base spot, the two of them going back and forth. That could help Casas stay on the field, and it could help mitigate some of Alonso's defensive concerns. But maybe they're looking at their situation and saying, we don't need Bregman's glove and overall impact at third base as much as we could use Pete Alonso's power in the middle of our lineup, because they don't have any power hitter like Pete. And so having Pete Alonso and at Fenway Park, I mean, Pete would do damage if he played all of his games at Fenway. Not only does he have the monster, which would be easy for him to clear and also easy for him to turn a bunch of fly balls into singles and doubles, but he also would have the short porch all the way down the right field line that he could easily get to. So I think that this is a really dangerous, potential landing spot as far as if you're a Mets fan who wants Alonso to come back, because they have a need. They need a big bat in the middle of their lineup, and they can clear things up to make it make sense very easily. It's a good landing spot for Pete. It's a iconic franchise, ballpark he'd love to hit in. He was on Adam Ottavino's YouTube channel. They went through like their head-to-head matchups and went back and forth. If you watch the stream, there's a home run when Ottavino is pitching for the Red Sox that Pete Alonso hit off of him. And he just talked about, he said something along the lines of, "Oh yeah, at Fenway, like there's no chance. It's so easy for me to it made it obvious that Pete likes to hit in that ballpark." And so you combine all of these things, I can see it. I could see Pete Alonso sign with the Boston Red Sox. And honestly, of other places he could go, I could probably stomach that a little bit more than if he signed with the Yankees, right? Or if he signed with the Phillies. If he signed with, it would never happen, but if he signed with the Dodgers or something like that, right? Those would be landing spots. I'd be like, oh man, Pete Alonso ended up there. One of the teams I threw out there at the beginning of the offseason was the Nationals, only because they have no money on their books. And maybe they'd be the one team that said, screw it, we'll give Pete 7 years. Wouldn't want to see that. Pete Alonso going to Boston, I could root for him as a Red Sox, but what would that mean for the New York Mets? If you lose Pete Alonso, this market, it just falls off a cliff now. There's no Josh Naylor safety net that you can fall into. I'm like, hey, we're just going to pursue that guy instead. No. You really run out of options quickly. All of a sudden, Ryan O'Hearn's looking really attractive, and then you have the two guys from Japan. So what I want to talk about in the next segment is the alternatives again for Pete Alonso. If the Mets don't sign him, where else would they go? And then the other side of it is, who is going to be the one that leaves if one of them does? Is it Pete Alonso or Edwin Diaz? Which one, now that we're a couple weeks into the offseason, do I feel more confident in the Mets retaining? My answer might surprise you. We're going to go through that in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. The NBA season's back, and honestly, there's never been a better time to get into that arena, surrounded by fans, cheering on your team. But let's be honest, sometimes getting those tickets to get to the game, it can be a hassle because you have the queues, the login screens, the prices that jump at checkout. It can get really frustrating. That's why I use Game Time, because the app's going to give the advantage right back to you, the fans. Game Time's fast. It's easy. It's backed by the Game Time guarantee, so you're always going to get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time at the best price. Plus, all fees are included. So the price you see is the price you pay. The app made it super simple, so you can even view your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. You can buy tickets so quick. Matter of seconds, 2 taps, you're all set. For me, honestly, it's the fastest, cheapest, least stressful way I've been able to buy tickets to get to a game. So if you want to go to a game soon, download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB, LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. If you're an everydayer that always tunes into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. Start texting service where you get updates from me. Anytime news breaks on the Mets, you can ask me questions anytime. Take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways and live graphics sent to your phone each day so you know it's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. So, what are the options for the New York Mets if Pete Alonso signs with the Red Sox or any other team? I talked about two of them on the show on Friday, which is where I broke down the international market. Yeah, Munetaka Murakami and Kazuma Okamoto. Okamoto, I love as a secondary free agent acquisition. So if you sign Pete Alonso and then Okamoto is the free agent you sign to play some first, play some third, play a corner outfield spot on occasion, DH some, help Pete Alonso DH a little more because he can be a first baseman. I'm all in on that. Okamoto as the Pete Alonso replacement, I'm not really in on. Murakami as the Alonso replacement, you can go back and listen to the show. Very concerned about how long of a contract he's going to sign and whether or not he's really going to translate. I think the power is legit, but I don't know if he's going to be any better at first base than Pete Alonso, and I'm concerned he's going to strike out a lot more, and he's not going to be as complete of an all-around hitter. We forget at times because it's just what you've grown accustomed to, how much worse a lot of the alternatives are to Pete Alonso at first base. And I know the defense, can be a concern. But that production with the bat is hard to come by. Yes, you can go out and get Cody Bellinger, but to me, Cody Bellinger makes a lot more sense in the outfield than at first base. I think he's way less valuable as a first baseman than he is as a passable center fielder and a very plus corner outfielder. So let's just say you sign Bellinger. I'd rather have him play center field until Carson Bench is ready. And then when Bench is ready, I'd like to have Cody Bellinger either replacing Brandon Nimmo or Juan Soto and having the other guy going in DH. Internally, you have Mark Vientos. Apparently, you have Jeff McNeil. That was mentioned as a potential first base option for the Mets. You have Brett Beatty, but Brett Beatty is also your answer at third. Mark Vientos could be your answer at DH, and Jeff McNeil might still be your starting second baseman. So if any of those guys is plugging up a hole, you might be opening up another one. And then you have Ryan Clifford, who granted is close to big league ready and could be the answer at first base. But I would much rather have the Mets re-sign Pete Alonso to essentially be their DH, but can keep playing first base until Clifford's ready. And then if you have to at that point trade Mark Vientos, you trade Mark Vientos and give him a change of scenery. Hopefully you can find something attractive to bring back in. And that could be the first base situation. Or you keep all of them and eventually you decide between trading Vientos or trading Clifford if he has that much value and he can get you something. But the point is, it is asking a lot for Mark Vientos or Ryan Clifford to replace the production of Pete Alonso. And now on the market, there's not a first baseman that makes sense in free agency, in my opinion, that can replace Pete. Josh Naylor was the one, and again, I never really gave it too much thought because I always felt like he was going back to Seattle, but Naylor would have given you a better defender at first, a guy that's going to hit for a high average. Now all of a sudden he can steal a base too, and he's going to not only get on base, but he's going to have enough power to hit you 20 home runs. And in his best season from a power department in 2024, I think he did clear 30. So that was the other guy in this free agent class. And now that he's gone, I think the Mets have to bring back Pete Alonso. And that's where I get to who's more likely to stay and who's more likely to leave. I think Edwin Diaz is more likely to leave. Because with Pete Alonso, all right, the Red Sox make sense. If they sign Alex Bregman, they no longer make sense. It's that simple. And they still have a first baseman in Tristan Casas. Maybe they sign Kyle Schwarber to DH. Alonso doesn't make sense anymore. So that's the one landing spot that has started to come into the picture. How many teams could use Edwin Diaz? The Dodgers, the Blue Jays. Those are the teams who have already been reported to show some interest. But theoretically, any team could use Edwin Diaz. The Yankees could use Edwin Diaz. The Braves could use Edwin Diaz. The Phillies, well, they got Duran now, but seriously, any team can use Edwin Diaz. The market theoretically would be more open to Diaz than to Alonso. Now, I'm still holding out hope that both of those guys come back, but even with Pete Alonso standing alone in this market right now at first base, I just think that position's not valued, and it's going to be hard for Pete Alonso to get exactly what he's looking for in free agency. And my hope is the Mets are going to meet him close enough to what he desires and what they're willing to give up. And maybe it hurts a little bit more to give him that 5-year deal when you much prefer him on a 3-year deal. But if that brings him aboard and you have another viable 5-year offer on the table, like another team really is going to go to that extent to bring Pete Alonso in, I think you got to match it. And you got to bring Pete back because it's going to be so hard to replace that production offensively. Then it comes down to a point where you almost have to sign a Schwarber because otherwise, where's the power coming from? Bellinger's not going to hit you 29. He hit 29 last year with the Yankees, but that's a much different ballpark for a left-handed hitter who hits his home runs pull side. Much different situation. Is Murakami going to hit you the home runs? Yeah, maybe, but at what cost? What else is he providing? Now, yeah, you could say, well, Pete Alonso is willing to hit home runs, but that's not entirely true. Pete Alonso does not strike out a ton. Pete Alonso draws his walks. Pete Alonso gives you competitive at bat. Pete Alonso has built equity in the league where he is feared, and having him in your lineup changes how teams pitch to the guy in front of him and to the guy behind him. So I just think it's a no-brainer that Pete comes back still. To me, this Josh Naylor signing, what it really means for the market for Pete Alonso is it just is further evidence that first basemen don't get paid. They don't get paid to the extent that Pete Alonso might be dreaming of. There's not going to be a 7-year offer on the table. Josh Naylor is 2.5 years younger than Pete Alonso, and to get 5 years, he probably had to dip below $20 million per season. If I had to guess, you're probably looking at, I don't know, what's 18 times 5? 18 times 5 is what? Is that 90 exactly? I should know math better than that. Yeah, it's 90 exactly. Take a second, think it out, Ryan. Yeah, it's 90. If he gets, let's see, 18 and a half, that would be that would be 92.5 million if he got 18 and a half per. So the point is, whatever he lands on, whether it's 20 million per year and he does get the full 100, but again, the report is somewhere between 90 and 100, so I don't think it's going to be 100. Whether he gets 95 million and he gets the 19 million per, it is further evidence that first basemen aren't getting $25 million per over 5+ years these days. And so if Pete Alonso can get 130 million over 5 years, no deferrals, that's actually a good contract for him. And you add that to the $30 million that he made this past season. You add that to the $20 million he made in his final year of arbitration. And all of a sudden, for that same time period that Pete Alonso was offered that 7-year contract extension, where it was 152 million, something like that he was reportedly offered, or maybe it was even a little bit less than that, but it doesn't matter. It was definitely in that range, high 140s, low 150s. Now in that 7-year period of time, if Pete Alonso signs 5 for 130, he would have made $180 million. It's going to work out for Pete Alonso. It is. Turning down that contract was the right move for him financially for his career. Might take a winding road to get there, but he's bet on himself, and ultimately that bet has paid off. How much it's paid off, we're going to find out. I do think that we could see some movement coming soon, though. Not necessarily on Alonso, but on Edwin Diaz. Edwin was very quick to sign his contract last time. Seems to me he's the type of guy that wants to get that money locked up. He already met with the Blue Jays. He was at Citi Field for that, I think it was a World Baseball Classic qualifier or something along those lines. But he was at the ballpark. You might think that there could have been a meeting that happened at some point there. I'd love it if some resolution came this week, assuming that resolution was Diaz going back to the Mets. But we're going to have all your coverage whenever anything happens. I do apologize because over the weekend, I had told you guys on Friday's show I was going to do a prospect episode over the weekend, but I actually ended up getting sick. And so I'm getting over a cold. I feel like I'm pretty much through the woods on that one now. But needed a couple days to rest and recover. So you'll still get number 11 through 20 on my top prospect list coming up soon here. But I wanted to do a show probably tomorrow, barring any news, about Brandon Nimmo. There was a report that maybe the Mets were considering how much money they'd have to eat to shop him. I just want to go through that thought exercise of trying to trade Brandon Nimmo to see if there's any conceivable outcome where Brandon Nimmo is now with the New York Mets in 2026. So that should be a fun show. Make sure you tune in, follow, rate, review wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you want to be part of our Locked On Mets Insiders, be an everydayer, or if you are an everydayer that wants to be part of our Locked On Mets Insiders and be part of that texting service, you can find the link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets.